What up, internet? The Black Hokage here, aka TBH, and to be honest, I'd like for you to close your eyes for a moment. Let's rewind the clock. The year's 2003. I was 13 years old, meaning I was young, so young, like Nick Young. Probably got my first boner type young. It was an interesting year. It was driven by emotion and suspicion. This was a time where the US had planned to invade Iraq over fictitious weapons of mass destruction. R. Kelly had dropped some heat known as the Ignition remix. Lizzie McGuire was still my wife. The Chappelle Show had debuted. Carmelo Anthony could win and he had struggle braids. Finding Nemo released. Important to me back then was watching Raven's titties bounce up and down on That's So Raven after school. And somehow Tom Cruise was the last samurai. Things were a lot simpler back then, but to be honest, one of my fondest memories from that year was me cutting on my GameCube on a Saturday afternoon and listening to the soothing sounds of boy, when that Pete Rock and CL Smooth would come on, I would just sit at the menu for like 5 minutes straight vibing like, oh, snap. Today I'd probably say, shit, but I was 13 back then and I wasn't allowed to cuss. Anyways, welcome to a series that I call Bring It Back. The series where I provide you with facts, statistics, and nostalgia in one package as an educated analysis on why certain games or franchises should return. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the NBA Street series. In 2001, the video game market was dominated by, well, the same shit it's pretty much dominated by now. You had your Maddens, your NBA 2Ks, NFL 2K, and NBA Live. The only difference is, back then, NBA Live was the dominant basketball game. On the flip side of things, there was the emerging market for arcade sports-driven games. 2001 was also dominated by titles such as SXX Tricky, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, and Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX. So it was only natural that later in the year we got something that combined the best of sports and arcade gameplay. The original NBA Street released in North America and Europe on June 18, 2001 for the PlayStation 2 and the Nintendo GameCube. It featured a fictional street legend on the cover with a giant afro known as Stretch. NBA Street was different. It wasn't about running plays or having a high basketball IQ. It was simple fun that anyone of any age could get into. The game also managed to establish its own lore with street legends, even though the campaign was very minimalist. You know, names such as Stretch, Bonafide, Drake, Tekashi, and more. Oh, did I mention that this series featured the Game Breaker, a new mechanic that was solely about stunning on your opponent? That 3-on-3 style of arcade basketball was something the market desperately craved for, and it showed. But let's be real here, people. The series kicked into overdrive when NBA Street Volume 2 dropped April 28, 2003 for the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube.
My nigga.
EA Big took everything that they learned from the original game and put it on steroids. There were more street legends, more courts, more game modes, and the introduction of Game Breaker 2 wrapped up in a package that was much more lighthearted and vibrant. I feel like the first game took itself a bit too seriously compared to version 2. The second game was more colorful and just easier on the eyes. This game, y'all, was a big deal. 80s and 90s babies back me up. For the longest, Michael Jordan refused to allow companies to use his likeness in their game. I grew up in an era where if you played the Chicago Bulls, you just assumed that black silhouette in the back looking like a locked Smash Bros character was Michael Jordan.
Yo, stop playing, son.
That was the closest that we ever got to playing him. Now, after his second retirement in 1999, fans were treated to a string of games that featured him in the early 2000s. One of those games was NBA Street Volume 2. The best part is, Street didn't feature just one Jordan, not two, but 3 different Jordans representing 3 different eras. On top of that, the game featured more tricks and what felt like better defensive mechanics. Performing an off the heezy on someone or snatching the ball out of the air instead of blocking it was always satisfying, and the best person to do that with was my personal favorite character, Osmosis. I'm not talking about Osmosis Jones, I'm talking about Osmosis, baby. He could do everything in the game, which was rare because most players in the game were top heavy. They could do one thing and that was about it. If you were good enough, you'd build up a Game Breaker. Game Breakers were an auto bucket as long as you can get off a clean shot, but Game Breaker 2 was not only an auto bucket, but you were treated to a disrespectful cutscene that featured the enemy team stunting on your ass, and this would cause a lot of fights amongst me and my friends. And this was all complemented by a soundtrack that fit the tone of the game perfectly. You had sounds from Just Blaze, MC Light, Black Sheep, Nate Dogg, and more. Then NBA Street V3 game. This is the one that stands in a weird place for me. It wasn't bad, but I felt like this is the game where EA started to get a little lazy. They added a new mechanic where you could do tricks in the air with your Game Breaker dunk, but I feel like it just wasn't enough. I really don't remember what else new they brought to this game. It just didn't make an impression on me. To be honest, there was only 2 reasons my friends and I were hyped for the 3rd iteration. The Nintendo version featured Mario, Luigi, and Peach, and this was the first Street game where you could play the young phenom at the time.
LeBron James, LeBron James, LeBron James, LeBron James.
That's it. I really don't remember much else about this game. It's one of those weird games that it feels like EA just made it because they wanted to complete a trilogy and because the last 2 games made the money. At the NBA Street V3 drop, we waited 2 years for the 4th and final entry in the franchise, NBA Home Court. NBA Home Court is the Gears of War judgment of the Street series. We don't talk about this game. It wasn't flat out terrible, but it wasn't amazing either. It literally introduced nothing new to the series. Actually, Home Court dumbed down the gameplay by streamlining things, and the new art style was just ugly. The game looked like it had a big ass Instagram filter on it 3 years before Instagram existed. The big thing this game touted was its story mode and it being co-signed by Carmelo Anthony, because back then this was when like Carmelo was young and tried.
For me?
Oh. I guess that answers that part.
I mean, I don't know where that started, where that came from. Hey, P, they said I got to come off the bench.
This was the first game in the series that featured online play. It's just a shame that all my online memories involved terrible lag. People would skip all over the court, but the worst thing was when you're trying to defend a dunk from someone with shitty online, they just teleport to the hoop. Strangely though, this game still got good reviews at launch. This is one of those games that I think people began to hate in hindsight. Sales are always a driving force to whether or not a company greenlights a sequel, so here are some numbers courtesy of VG Charts. Street 1 sold 3.2 million, Street 2 sold 3.1 million, Street 3 has sold 1.6 million, and Home Court sold over 600,000. Now if you do the math, that means that the Street series has sold 8.5 million units to date. In the grand scheme of things, those aren't the biggest numbers, but we gotta keep in mind that we're talking about the early 2000s. That was pretty decent. The video game market has grown significantly since the last game released 10 years ago. The rise of YouTubers, Twitch streamers, and online influencers would greatly boost the sales of this franchise. Just look at the 2K community on YouTube alone. All they do is start drama with each other. Let them do some fancy dunks on each other for their videos because they're not going to settle it in Smash. Hell, the release of NBA Playgrounds last year just proves that the community craves more arcade sports games. The impact on the culture is very important when discussing legacy. The Street series undeniably had impact on the gaming culture. Don't believe me? Let's examine the situation. The success of Street spawned numerous spin-offs and rip-offs. Let's talk about the rip-offs first. Without NBA Street, there would be no NBA Ballers, and one Street Ball, or Street Hoops. Hell, Street Hoops was even featured in this skit.
Hooray for me, Billy! In your face! Children is our future, I'm the future. I'm the future. You can't deny me, Billy. You can't deny me. It's too real for you. What I say you weren't gonna score no more? Tell your little friends the dreams do come true. Dave Chappelle came and saw you in the hospital and whoop your monkey.
Now for the spin-offs. NBA Street inspired the creation of NFL and FIFA Street, which are also classics in their own right. I just named you 5 games that spawned because of NBA Street. Granted, and one basketball had already existed, but they didn't make their video game until they saw what Street did. Without the success of NBA Street, you wouldn't have been given the option to control and one legends such as Hot Sauce, The Professor, and The Flu. Hell, I could argue NBA 2K's My Park and Playground mode is 2K trying to cash in on the void that NBA Street left 10 years ago. 2K even copied NBA Street Home Court's shitty online servers from My Park and Playground. There is no denying that this game's impact can still be felt in 2018. The icing on the cake is that each entry in this game's franchise has an average Metacritic of 80% or higher. Street 1 is 88%, Street 2 is 90%, Street 3 is 89%, and Home Court got 81%. You add that all up and you average it, then the series sits at an 87% overall. So if I combine review scores, sales numbers, and the series' undeniable impact on pop culture, then I think there's no denying that EA needs to bring it back. Hey, thanks for watching my video. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you'll never miss another video. Also consider pledging my Patreon. It helps keep the lights on. There's a link in the description box below. Peace.